Hey guys, so what I'm going to do is use our place value chart to be able to keep track of my place values. So in my whole numbers, everything from my ones place over to my billions is a whole number. But once you look at this decimal point, anything to the right of that decimal point is part of a whole. We have tenths, hundredths, thousands. Make sure when you say decimals out loud, you have that TH sound at the end of each of those. Otherwise, people will think you're talking about just tens, hundreds, thousands in your wholes. The difference between those two is that these have the TH that's and they're a decimal, where without it, it's a whole number. So I want to kind of model with a picture, show you what the fraction is, an equivalent decimal, and how you would write that in word form. So for us to be able to know what we're dividing, we first need to know what our whole is. So we are going to use this rectangle as our reference to know how much our whole is. So I'm going to make my model the same size as that whole. So those two wholes are equivalent. Okay, so this is one whole. But when I start cutting that whole into 10 equal pieces, that changes the value of this whole. Each piece, so there are 10 equal pieces, each piece is a tenth. So say that I use a pink marker and I just color in one of those pieces. So if we were doing this as a fraction, your numerator or the top number is how many are shaded. So there is one shaded out of 10 total. So the fraction of this model would be 1/10. So this model shows 1/10. If I were to write the equivalence of that in a decimal form, well, let's look. Here is my tenths place value. Well, how many tenths are shaded? 1. So I will put that decimal point, and there's only 1/10, so I will write a 1 in the tenths value, place value spot. To say this, to write it out, it is 1/10, exactly how you say it as a fraction. So I will write 1/10. All right, let's do another one just so we can visualize it. So my whole is the same. So here's a reference for what my whole, the size of my whole will be. So I will make my whole again. I am still going to cut it into 10 equal pieces. This time I'm going to shade, let's do 4. All right, so if I were to ask you the fraction of this, your numerator is the number shaded, which is 4. Total number of pieces is 10. So you would say this as 4/10. Well, let's look at our decimal place values. We have tenths, hundredths, thousands. We know we're in tenths, so in our place value of tenths, there are 4. So I will do my decimal place, put a 4 in the tenths. This shows 4/10, and that is exactly how you would write it. All right, let's do another one. Again, our whole is this same size. So I'm going to draw my whole. This time I'm going to make it a little bit more difficult. I'm going to cut it into those 10 pieces. But then I'm actually going to cut those 10 pieces into tens. I'm going to do it sideways. So now I have a total of 100 pieces. Wow. All right, so I'm going to use yellow, or this is orange, my bad. And I'm going to color in, that would be 10. This would be 20. This would be 30. And then let's just do 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. So let's write that as a fraction. This fraction, I have colored in 35 pieces. So that would be my numerator. out of how many total? There is 100. So if I were to ask you to say this fraction, you would say 35 100ths. So to write my decimal, let's look. Here's my hundredths place. Well, when you look at the number 35, you would write it as 35 because the 5 ends up in the hundreds. So whenever you write a number, for example, let's put our decimal place and we write 35. You look at whatever that last place value you write in. So that 5 would technically be in that hundredths place. So that's the word that we would say after we say it. So we would say 35 hundredths. So that's exactly how we would write it. 35 hundredths. Now, when you are doing the written form of a decimal, you need to make sure you have this TH. If you were to leave off the TH on any of these, people would think that it would come over into my whole numbers. Each of these are decimals, so you need to make sure you have that TH in there. Let's do one more. So again, use your whole as your reference. I am going to divide this into 10 equal pieces first because that's easier for me. And then I'm going to divide those crosswise into 10 equal pieces. So if you were to count these, you would have 100 total. So now this would be, I'm going to color in, there's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, let's do 61, 62, 63. Let's do 63. So your numerator is the total number you colored, which is 63 out of 100 total pieces. So that's 63 100. So if I were to write this as a decimal, I will write that 63. And so whatever that last number, whatever place value it is in is what you say. So it's 63 hundredths. So we would write that with our decimal place, put 63 in there, and then you would write that as 63 hundredths. Do not forget that TH. I always make sure that I do that if I put the TH, if I underline that. So that's just easier for me. I'm actually going to do one more. So again, my hole is this size. So I always just make sure I keep it where I need it to be. I'm going to cut it into 10. And then I'm going to cut it into hundredths. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to color in 4. So how would I show that? So I only shaded in 4 out of 100 total. So that's 4 100ths in a fraction. How would I write that as a decimal? Because if I were to place the 4 right here, my 4 is in the tenth, so that would show 4 tenths. So that's not correct. So how would I show 4 hundredths? Well, I can put a 4 here and put 4 hundredths, but how do I show nothing in the tenths? Because the tenths is between my decimal point and the hundredths. So what number means nothing? Well, 0. So I would say this as 4 hundredths. So to write this decimal, I would put my decimal point, a 0 in the tenths, and a 4 in the hundredths. So you would write this as 4 hundredths. To make sure you write the TH, underline it to make sure it's there. All right, good job, guys.